Warhammer 40K Space Marine 2 rules so damn hard, but you don't need me to convince you of that. This is my first true experience with the Warhammer universe. I had played Darktide previously back in 2022, but that was maybe for about an hour or two. So when all the preview events and videos started dropping for Space Marine 2, it looked like one hell of a game and one that I needed to play. So after making my way through the main story, which took me roughly 8 to 10 hours, the Operation side content, as well as dabbling into the PvP mode, it's safe to say that this game is worth every damn penny. And that's coming from someone who knows literally nothing, and I mean nothing about the lore or the characters, because this is a sequel to the first game that launched some 12 years ago. You would think that I would be totally lost jumping into the world of 40k, and you would be right, but at no point did I think it was a bad thing. A lot of the time, I looked at all the weird and crazy shit that was happening around me, and I just looked at my buddy and I nodded and I said, hell yeah. And this game has plenty of those moments, so if you're ready for just a crazy ride, a good ass story, strap in for a ride that's going to have you jetpacking and stomping your way through endless amounts of bugs and heretics, all in the name of the Emperor.
We're saved! Brothers, we fight! For Ostrava! We will cover your approach. Victory or death!
Let's talk about the technical performance first and foremost. I played Space Marine 2 in 1440p on an RTX 4080 with an i7 13700K with all the settings set to their max values and DLSS set to quality. I feel like I've been saying it a lot, but this game looks absolutely unreal in some sequences. Some of the larger skyboxes that you get to see as the game progresses are out of this world. First, you have the drab background of a muddy swamp in the early game missions, and then you have a goddamn mega church that sits above the clouds with flying swarms of Tyranids approaching your position and a planet situated in the background. I mean, come the fuck on, look at this. All the environments look so damn good when you're traversing through them, and sometimes the levels themselves also have different segments that also change up the environment. I just want to give a little nod to the way that they're able to simulate the sheer number of enemies on screen, because it's one of the more impressive things that we get to see in this game. Early on, I thought it might have just been for show or a gimmick, but note, each and every one of these enemies that you see in these giant swarms are enemies that you can kill and fight. Saber Interactive, the developers of this game, were also the same team that worked on the pretty successful World War Z game that used the same technology for its mass waves of zombies, and you could see that clearly in this game. And I know I briefly touched on the graphics and the art design, but none of this means anything if the game runs like shit, and I'm happy to report it ran flawless. Outside of an infinite loading screen that did occur to me once, I also have heard that some players are running into issues with matchmaking both in PvP and the operations mode. So much of this game is just downright incredible. From the set pieces that you'll walk and battle through to just the design of a random corridor, all of it's oozing this very brutal aesthetic, and from what I can gather, that's pretty on point with the 40k universe. Fuck you! I want to start off the story portion of my review by saying this is my first introduction to the 40k universe and its broader lore, so it's possible I may misspeak or get something wrong. When the story of Space Marine 2 starts off, you assume the role of Lieutenant Titus of the Death Watch, who is a returning player from the first game and has served in his position of the Death Watch for over 100 years. One thing that this game does a decent job is helping you get caught up with the lore of the characters within the game, and I'm sure returning players are going to get more out of having played the first game and experiencing it, but as someone who hasn't, I was still able to get a gist of who Titus was within those first 30 minutes of the game. After some dickery and bullshittery, you're reassigned to the Ultramarines, taking command of a new squad with you and two other Ultramarines that are AI bots, but can also be controlled with up to 2 friends playing them, which is how I played a majority of the game's story. Titus is this seasoned veteran, and his squad really doesn't all trust him that much over the course of the game, so it was cool to see as the game progresses, Titus, little by little, will open up kind of to his squad, but it's more so showing how he earns the trust of his squad mates. The story of Space Marine 2, like I said, is going to take you about 8 to 10 hours to complete, maybe shorter if you're just blazing through the levels, but each of these levels were fantastic in offering up different varieties, not just in the types of location, but also in the abilities and the weapons we got to use over the course of those levels. While there isn't going to be any type of progression or skill tree in the base campaign, The further that you progress into the story, the more items you'll unlock for your arsenal. This can mean having a different starting and secondary weapon, or even swapping out your main melee weapon. Might I just add one thing? The hammer is so fun to use. I love it. Each of these missions also feels like you're being dropped into the middle of a galactic war against an unstoppable force. And that might sound like window dressing, but very rarely do you ever feel like you're in the middle of a war, more so just existing around where that war is happening. But on these battlefields, you truly feel like you're in the middle of the shit. Whether that's the endless hordes of enemies that are attacking you, or just the sheer scale at which you can see the battle around you happening and coming towards you. It all really sells that scenario in the situations that you're going to be put in. Combat in Space Marine 2 is best described as simple yet effective. You have your typical primary and secondary weapons, then you have your different melee weapons that you can unlock as well. You don't really realize how fun this combat is until you're neck deep into a horde of Xenos, fighting for your life, chaining finishing moves from heavier combos to finishing moves. And this is because the only way to get your armor back in this game is by doing finishing moves or gun strikes on an enemy. And to do those, you either need to perfect parry an enemy attack or you need to melee stagger them enough. Health is also one thing that you can't regenerate from killing enemies and will actually need to be replenished by finding med stims out in the world, so it does pay to look around these maps when you're going through them. There's also going to be some data slates that you can find, which are these little lore entries that can sort of give you some context to the area that you're in. This isn't going to be your 40 to 50 hour plus main story RPG that takes you a couple weeks to get through. Space Marine 2 is a video game that you can sit down, play, probably beat it in like a day or two. It's got some solid voice acting and performance and some really fun gameplay. And at the end of the day, there's no single player microtransaction bullshit they're trying to sell you. So it all leads to just a great time, and that's before you even think about adding friends into the mix. Another key component to Space Marine 2 is the operations missions that you can play. You'll be first made aware of the mission after the tutorial, and what you do is take the role of another squad whose story runs concurrent with that of those in the main story that we just played. Personally, I waited till I finished the main story of the game before diving into these, just in case they contain spoilers. I wanted to be safe, so after playing through them, you could have played through those kind of interweaving them, but I figured it was best to just save them and just ram through all 6 of them. But one of the big key differences in this mode is, unlike the main story, you actually do have a little bit of customization and choices to make within a class. You get to choose one of the 6 classes that are available, and each of these classes are going to have access to a different set of weapons, as well as a unique special ability, with my personal favorite being the Vanguard class using a grapple hook. You can use it to get really close, execute quick finishers. Then you also have your Assault class, which has got the jump pack and the big hammer, so that's best used for your more crowded combat encounters. You might think, sweet, I've got a little bit of variety and customization, but you can actually even take it a step further with skill trees that each of the classes are going to have access to. And as you play and as you level up these classes, you're going to slowly unlock different skill tree abilities that range from either buffing you or the entire team. So it's best to take a look at what might fit your squad best before entering these missions. This is going to be where a good bulk of the time is going to be spent in Space Marine 2's post-game, simply because these missions are designed sort of like a strike out of Destiny 2, with many moving parts and sections, usually culminating in a large boss battle or a final stand moment. Currently, with 6 maps at launch and with plenty more maps on the way, it looks like it's a healthy plan in motion when it comes to keeping the game lively and fresh. And after playing through all of the 6 missions, I gotta say, keep them coming. Did I also mention that this is the section of the game that you can fully customize your Space Marine armor to your heart's content? And I truly mean that. If you want to make your character look like some rainbow puke monster, go ahead. If you want to make them look like a fucking highlighter, go ahead. How the customization items are unlocked is pure genius. You play the game. You level up, you get currency, you use that currency to either buy a new paint job or some different pieces of armor. There's no in-game shop or microtransaction bullshit at the moment. There is a season pass, however, that does add a healthy amount of customization options like different colorways and a few different armor variations, but that's entirely optional and more so people are seeing it as supporting the devs. I appreciate it though because it doesn't feel like they're dangling the goodies in front of your face, only for you to realize that you have to spend more money on top of the $60 that you just dropped. The last component of Space Marine 2 is the inclusion of a PvP mode. And while I'm going to just come out right now and say it, this isn't some deep multiplayer mode with tons of leveling and stuff like the operations mode. In fact, it's kind of the opposite. It's a very stripped down, yet simple, yet fun multiplayer offering. Currently, there are only 3 game modes that you can play and only 3 maps available, with some more to come down the line, so it is very much bare bones at this moment. But I would say with the little amount of time that I've spent with it, I had some fun. It's not going to knock your socks off or blow you out of the water, but what it might do is allow you to level up, earn some currency, maybe try out one of the 6 classes in the game. You've got your basic team deathmatch, then you've got your domination mode, and these fights can be pretty close depending on your team's composition because you can't all run the same character and you do have to have some variations, so it's best to have maybe a backup or 2 in mind. I know this mode isn't going to be for everyone, but it is going to have its crowd, but it looks like I'll be playing more operations till they add a few more modes or maps. I know I mentioned at the top of my review, Space Marine 2 was my first real introduction to the world of 40k, and while I might not have understood everything that was going on, I'm sure a few big references or reveals went over my head, but I still enjoyed my time with the game, and I think that's a great thing to say. The campaign was a solid 10-hour experience that sees you traversing different locations with your squad, which can be played either solo or with up to 2 friends. Then you have the operations mode that allows you to play story adjacent missions, but with a little more leveling and Destiny-like mechanics. Lastly, you have the PvP offering that, while I briefly touched on it, isn't going to be everyone's cup of tea. It's there for the people who want to give it a shot. If Saber's track record with World War Z is any indication, it's safe to say that we'll be busy with Space Marine 2 for a while. I know they showed off a roadmap for the next year or so covering some of the new features like operations, chapter customizations, but the one I'm really looking forward to is the Horde mode. That's supposed to be coming sometime in 2025. After playing all of this for nearly 20 hours, I can see why there are so many fans of Warhammer and the 40k universe. From the what seems like endless amounts of lore to the batshit crazy designs, and all around just cool shit, the world of 40k was a fun experience. I have been digging into some of the lore videos on the side while working on the scripts, and even dabbling into looking at some of the minifigures, but after seeing some of those prices, I might have to hold off for a bit, or find a better job. All in all, if you like what you've seen or heard in this review, I think that Space Marine 2 is easily worth the asking price considering it's an honest-ass video game, and that's what we need more of these days. If you did make it this far, make sure to drop a like if you enjoyed the video. Also, make sure to subscribe to stay up to date on all my reviews coming here in the future. Also, consider being a member if you really want to show some extra support for me. I really do appreciate it. But this has been my review for Warhammer 40k, Space Marine 2. Thank you for watching.
What is your reward?
My salvation is my reward.
What is your craft?
My craft is death.
What is your pledge?
My pledge is eternal service.